Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. I'm MaryLee Sachs, and I'm with Brandpie. I'm based in New York. Thank you so much for joining us today for our webinar. I'm delighted to be introducing a really fun panel. I'll start with Andreas Hochberger, who is the Senior Vice President of Corporate Marketing at Eppendorf, a leading life sciences company that develops, manufactures, and distributes laboratory instruments, consumables, and services. Based in Hamburg, Andreas oversees global brand management, marketing technology, online and performance marketing, and marketing communications. He has some 30 years of marketing experience and very impressively holds a PhD in pharmaceutical biology, among other degrees in microbiology and finance. Welcome to the panel, Andreas. Next up, we have Darius Meadon, who is the Chief Marketing Officer of Owkin, a rapidly scaling company on a mission to understand complex biology through AI to identify precision therapeutics, de-risk and accelerate clinical trials, and develop diagnostics. He has nearly 20 years of experience in leading marketing and innovation projects for organizations like Bayer, Unilever, GSK, Coca-Cola, and many others. He's also served as the head of brand and marketing at Founders Factory, a prominent venture building and early stage investor, where he shaped brand identities, crafted product marketing strategies, and executed go-to-market plans for over 100 startups. Amazing. And finally, last but not least, is Conor McKechnie, Vice President of Marketing and Strategy at Cytiva, where he leads a team that balances innovation with stability for life sciences customers. Cytiva was formerly part of GE Healthcare Life Sciences, as you may know, and is a global provider of technologies and services that advance and accelerate the development and manufacture of therapeutics. In his role since 2016, Conor has been in the life sciences space for more than 18 years, including, again, GE Healthcare Life Sciences, and as director and trustee of CASE, the UK Campaign for Science and Engineering. And note to our audience's members in the UK, Conor is judging the Marketing Week Marketing Awards this year. As he says, he's been kindly invited to be super judgy. So if you're entering those, watch out. Today's discussion is rooted in how brand can supercharge pivotal business moments, such as mergers and acquisitions, strategic pivots, divestments, and joint ventures. So to get us going, I would like to pose a question to all of our panelists first, and then I'll be diving into everybody individually as well. I'd like to start with a question about your organizations and how they've been experiencing interesting business pivots, be it acquisition, expansion, or fast scaling during rapid growth and change. How do you ensure that the culture remains intact throughout? And how do you bring employees along with you on the change journey? And I will just say, we've just done a study with chief marketing officers on culture and how they're doing much more in this space, teaming up with the CHROs in your organization. So I'd really love to hear how you've managed that. I'll start with Andreas.
Yeah, thanks, MaryLee. A great question, because I think it's the very core of it, right? So if we don't get it embedded in the organization, if the organization isn't ready, or it feels overwhelmed by such changes, like a design system change or a rebranding change, for instance, which then touches the emotional, identity of each of the employees. If you don't do it right, I think it's a key thing. So it's not just enough to develop everything, great strategy, new design system. You have all your roadmap from all the market measures, everything to change it. But if you forget to really do all this cultural change management, you're lost, and you won't get the buy-in. So in Eppendorf, as this is a privately owned company in a smaller scale, right, roughly 1 billion sales, we take a bit more cautious approach. So we had pivotal moments with the acquisition, maybe 2007 with New Brunswick, 2012 with Daskip in the bioprocess space, and now most recently with Hymac or Cookie. There was always this big element of cautious cultural shifts. So we did more, the post-merger integration was 2 to 3 years each time. Sometimes we preserved the old brand also because customers liked it, right? So you need to be very careful. I think we are scientists, and our customers are a special breed, I think. So they stick to brands, which is good, of course. Brand loyalty is a good thing. I think everybody here benefits from that. But the key point is really the internal effect should not be underestimated. It's extremely important for the success of any rebranding or brand adaptation exercise you do. You just see 80 years, we are 80 years now. Just this background just came out, right? So yeah, you need to balance modernity with also the legacy, the positive legacy you have.
MaryLee, I think you're on.
Yeah, you're muted.
Here I was trying to be very organized here. I'm just saying I would imagine that with an organization as old as 80 years is probably perhaps even more challenging to get people to change mindsets and think about change for the organization.
Yeah.
Darius, what's been your experience in this space and bringing the employee base along with the journey?
So as an AI company, I think for us, really talent is the most important thing. There's a huge war for talent for the best AI and ML engineers. So we take our teams incredibly seriously. So from the very start, both myself and the chief people officer have very strong relationship with each other. So a very strong bi-directional relationship around culture. So I think we've always known that brand and culture is two sides of the same coin. From a technology perspective, we have pivoted several times. So I think the latest iteration really now is the rise of agentic AI. As a company that straddles half scientists, half AI engineers, there is an interesting cultural shift between the two. So we're really making sure we preserve both cultures at the same time, whilst really pushing forward aggressively into agentic AI. And for us, what that looks like in terms of engagement of teams is meeting the teams where they're at. And with that, I mean finding ways to engage them that naturally speak to them. So for the quieter, more studious scientific sides of people, we have a beautiful library and a beautiful office. We left little booklets for them to talk all about how the shift to agentic is going to impact them and what we want to achieve with it. So for the quiet people who like to take information that way, we did it that way. For people who like to talk, there were focus groups, there were multiple town hall meetings, there was meet the executive committee and have a one-to-one session with whichever committee member we want to talk to. We had various videos, internal quizzes. So I think it's a variety of different activities that span both internal engagement and marketing, but also making sure you understand your team members. So different team members like to receive information in different ways and catering to that.
Conor, how about you? How does it work at Cytiva?
Well, we found ourselves in what I'd say is good question first. Thank you. Nice to be here. Cytiva found itself, or the organization that became Cytiva, in a really extraordinary, probably once in a career situation where we were spun out from one of the largest brands in the world. And because of the way that we were spun out, we were unable to carry that brand with us. And that required us to be really, really intentional about the way that we built the culture and the brand of the company that we wanted to become. And so we asked the people who are most important to it, and Darius said it, it's the talent in the organization. So we asked 6,500 people, what do you want us to be when we grow up into this new company outside of GE? And then, of course, we asked our customers and we asked partners and stakeholders, and we came around a identity that really spoke to the values of all of those stakeholders. And then from that, we enabled ourselves to go on to choose a name. And we did that with thousands and thousands of suggestions. And we whittled those down by measuring effectively how they resonated with customers. Some of the suggestions were way out there and definitely wrong. And we ended up with Cytiva as a name. And then some of you may or may not recognize the Pharmacia drop as our logo, which is over 60 years old. We revived it from one of the founding organizations, as it were, that was part of this. So we built a very, very intentional culture, brand identity, and outward and inward expression of who we want to be as a company.
I'm curious about how you engage. You mentioned 6,500 people. How and both Andreas and Darius, you would have done likewise, no doubt. How did you actually connect with everybody to find out what they wanted in the new organization and what they wanted. Darius, you mentioned the quiet people and the more outspoken people. How did you figure that out?
Well, so it was at an interesting time as well. So the announcement around us being spun off, we released that to the market in February of 2019. We started doing the work in the background as to what that would mean. We built from a set of workshops that we ran with the executive team and some of the top leaders in the business, a whole series of what you might call micro workshops and micro engagements, which were then cascaded across the whole of the organization, asking different types of questions that fed into what eventually became our brand attributes and behaviors and so on. And then, of course, beginning 2020, we were due to go live with the new brand identity and the new name of the company and so on the 1st of April, and no joke, 2020. Of course, we got hit by the pandemic. And in one way, we were kind of blessed by that because we were able to reach everybody digitally. It was just expected that we would pivot the activity to online. So we were able to gather an awful lot more insight, actually, by taking those micro workshops and turning them into online engagement activities and collecting all that data. So it was unexpected, but we were nimble enough to be able to do that. And it seems to have landed very well. You hear people say in the organization, despite the fact that we're only 5 years old as a brand, that feels very Cytiva, or I'm not sure whether Cytiva would do that or say that. So it's really embedded well.
That's phenomenal. Darius, back to what you were talking about with quiet people and more outspoken people. How did you figure that out?
I mean, again, to echo what Conor said, it's really, digital has created such an interesting landscape for us to play around in and do micro surveys. We all, have the latest tech stack in terms of we work with Notion and with Slack, and with all of these tools that have the ability for you to form, little groups of people who can explore particular topics. So really making sure that you solicit participation and invite them to a couple of groups and say, well, which group do you want to be part of? Which group do you self-identify as? And then having little quizzes and making things fun for people. There's a lot of GIFs, a lot of fun animations to kind of get people in on the process, because everyone's super busy. So you're going to have to find a playful way of engaging people on these more chat-like programs to get them to get involved. But I think we've seen great results with using Slack and Notion for this.
Yeah. Andreas, how did you manage to kind of bring everybody along? What were some of the tools that you used to connect with your internal folks?
So we have, on a regular basis, we have our annual employee engagement survey. So this also contains some questions and some elements where we can check in on the engagement status and also the internal employee loyalty status, also the brand perception, which is shifting now. As you mentioned, I'm now with Eppendorf 10 years, so a lot has changed, So this is, our customer base is changing. There is this generation shift. We can, for ages, talk about boomers, millennials, Gen X, Gen Y, etc. Very interesting shifts here. I think, Darius, you will encounter this also big time, especially for the younger generation in your field, especially. So we try to build up enough awareness and have the sensors to see, okay, internally. So we have sales, and I'm also like to talk to the shop floor guys. We have some very creative, engaged people who are normally doing Kaizen and manufacturing effectiveness and everything, but they love to talk about the brand. And of course, sometimes we need to control a little bit what's coming out here when they do their internal events. But this is exactly where we can check in and can see, okay, what is the very core of the brand? What is the Eppendorf way? As a C, what is our story? So that's something that we can check in. On the other hand, of course, we also every other year we try to really reach out externally, also by brand surveys. And then we can see, okay, everybody tells us we have a solid brand. So, okay, fine, you tell me that, but is it really true? So we always need to recheck and get a critical distance to what is our own perception of ourselves.
Right.
So as we are not in that situation like Conor was, where you need to do something here. Basically, we are this divesting. It's more an evolutive approach, but we need to keep track. Not to be completely disruptive, but still move on, right, and change it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Going back to something that Conor said earlier, that as he just said, the Cytiva brand was born in 2020 as a result of one of the largest corporate carve-outs in the biotech world when Danaher acquired GE Healthcare Life Sciences. Could you talk us through that pivotal moment and the steps you took to communicate this change, not just to we've just been talking about the internal audience, but what about your external stakeholders? What were some of the things that you did there?
Yeah, it was a very, I've got to say, in retrospect, when I look at what we did, I can only be incredibly proud of the team. At the very beginning, I'm not joking, it was a real moment, right? We were really kind of caught like deer in the headlights going, how are we going to do this? We don't have that expertise within the organization, because being part of GE, brand management and so on was owned at a corporate level by another entity. We had none of that talent. So the first thing we did was hire an extraordinary brand leader who helped guide us through it. But until she joined, it was me working in the background very hard, learning very quickly. We knew that we had to bring a lot of the brand equity that sits with the GE Life Sciences and GE Healthcare Life Sciences brand with us. And we went out very quickly and measured what that looked like. And importantly, we measured it against the competition. So we got very real measures of brand premium and brand power, share of voice, saliency, and so on, all of those brand measures that you would expect, a company like Kantar to help you work with. And we then identified through voice of the customer and anonymous surveys with customers what their perceptions of the GE Healthcare Life Sciences brand was, what they might have as ambitions for something like that, and what they valued in a life sciences tools partner. And we were able to then kind of design what we thought the brand promise would look like. And then we started talking to customers, whether it be online or whether it be in events or whether it be through part of our automated marketing campaigns. And of course, also lots of change control notices going to customers because of things like legal entities changing, to be able to talk to customers and say, look, we're going to not be GE Healthcare Life Sciences at some point. And we know that date will be 1st of April 2020. We're going to be Cytiva. And we communicated in a mixed fashion. So people were familiar with the GE Healthcare Life Sciences brand. We introduced the Cytiva brand to them. Once we'd switched over, we communicated primarily as Cytiva, but we also mentioned that previously known as GE Healthcare Life Sciences. And the time that took for that switch to go over was very, very intentional. We communicated in mixed branding for at least 6 months on purpose to bring that GE Healthcare Life Sciences brand values and equity into the Cytiva brand. And we very, very quickly saw Cytiva go from 0 in terms of brand power and brand premium up to maybe 5 or 10% shy of where GE Healthcare Life Sciences was before we announced the merger.
That's incredible. I'm really, truly an amazing story. Since then, Cytiva has gone on to acquire numerous other businesses, now united under the Cytiva brand. How have you used what you learned from the initial sort of launch to build such a strong brand in just 5 years? I suppose part of that is leaning on the GE Healthcare equity that you just talked about, but are there other things that you've done?
So that's a very good question, and it's not always successful. We don't always do a great job. It would be disingenuous to say it works all the time. But that idea of communicating the two brands together during a transition is very, very important. We've since integrated the Paul Life Sciences brand into our organization, some smaller brands like VanRx, Elevector, and so on that have come as part of our organization. And again, intentional about making the link. Sometimes we do it well, sometimes we don't. It's very important to make sure that the people that you're taking with you into the new brand don't feel that their old brand is being mistreated or disrespected or shut down or what have you. And so there's a lot of very careful internal change management work that needs to be done. And to both Darius and Andreas's point, brands are things that people are very, very emotional about. That's the whole point of a brand, to build an emotional connection. So you need to connect with people emotionally when you start to talk about what changes to that brand might look like and be.
Yeah, brilliant. Darius, question for you. Owkin is a business that's less than 10 years old and has since raised over $400 million from leading biopharma companies and VCs, including strategic investments from Sanofi and Bristol Myers Squibb. In that time, you oversaw its brand refresh. How did the new brand help attract and unlock investment for the company?
So I think when investors look at investing in AI companies, especially in the life sciences space, there's a couple of things. I think the first is honesty. So, one of our mantras at Owkin is, I know what I don't know. Our founder always says it. And I think a brand that is modest and humble, does an overpromise in the life sciences space is I think one that goes far. It really resonates. But at the same time, since AI is such a hot topic and it's such a big investment space, especially now with agentic, there is a trick to be had with making sure that you project a future that is really, ambitious and bold, because to get that level of investment, you have to take investors on a journey with you to say, I'm not just fixing tomorrow, I'm really completely revolutionizing the way we'll discover drugs and new diagnostics in the future. So I think it's for us, the brand challenge was, how do we balance that humility, the scientific method of I only know once I've done an experiment, with saying, but we are ambitious enough to know that we want to change the world. So for us, that was the first thing, unlocking that balance between humble and ambitious. I think the second thing was simplifying the science, both on the drug discovery side and on the actual biology side, but also on the AI side. So even though investors spend a lot of time in the AI space, we are at the cutting edge of that technology. We were at the time leaders in the technology called federated learning and representational learning. And these are all relatively complex AI technologies that you really have to explain to people who are not AI native. So I think there's also a simplicity in the storytelling that makes your technology feel easy to grasp, and designed that way on purpose. And then I think the last thing is, and this is classic branding, but it's just coherency. It's making sure you show up the same way again and again to investors, to clients, at conferences, to our academic partners from which we gain the data, to our internal staff. It's that coherency that really instills a sense of trust. So, if you think of fundraising, it's not just one meeting, it's a long series of meetings. And they open up the data room. And if all the documents in a data room look the same, they start trusting that those documents mean something. And it's a small thing, but it's very, very important. And a rapidly growing company like Owkin, it's, that's not something one can easily take for granted for, because we're so in a hustling mentality that sometimes people are like, oh yeah, I'll do the brand later. But getting to a place where you put brand at the center and say, this is a real value driver, so it doesn't matter how fast we go, we always need to stay on brand. That was a real culture shift, especially for scientists. Owkin's also a French company, which means, in French culture, marketing is just a bit of glass. They're really all about the hard science and being humble. So that was a real thing to overcome, also to say, no, actually, we're a brand-driven company as much as we're a science and an AI-driven company. But I think with the brand refresh, it gave us an opportunity to do all of those things, to change the culture, to get coherency going, to balance the humble with the ambitious, and to make sure we have branded vehicles that we can simply tell our story and our technology.
I love the coherency idea. We talk a lot about ruthless consistency, which is the same sort of concept. I'm curious about the leadership team, because one of the things that we find sometimes it's quite difficult to get the leadership team all on the same page. How did that work? Because clearly you're trying to make sure you have the balance piece, but you want the leaders to kind of be bought into that and be right on message every time they speak to somebody, including your investor community.
Yeah, so I was very lucky that we have two co-founders, and they each represented one of the archetypes of people within our organization. So there's the one, Gilles, who's a machine learning professor, very scientific. And then we have Thomas, who's a doctor, but also the very ambitious, very visionary founder. And our XCOM team kind of fall right down the middle. So the serious scientists and the drug discovery people, and then the people who've worked a bit more in industry and who have a bit more of an ambitious goal. So for me, really, it was making sure that we engage both of those and using actually the two founders as cheerleaders along the process, so that Gilles could talk to the more scientifically minded people and tell them why if our science looks good, it seems more credible and we can do more good science.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other side to say, well, why is vision important? Why are we not just thinking about the latest Nature paper we published, but also what that Nature paper might mean for customers? And how do you translate some of the real science into things that any audience can understand and can resonate with? So I think I had two great collaborators from the co-founders, which is kind of a unique setup.
Yeah, sounds like you were very fortunate on that front.
Yeah, definitely.
Question for Andreas. Eppendorf, like many others in the life sciences industry, has grown through numerous acquisitions over the years, including the centrifuge business of Koki Holdings back in 2020. What role did the Eppendorf brand play during and after the acquisition?
I think it was a technology bet. So I think because centrifugation can be quite a complex one, and the former and Koki also was this was their second divestment in few years, because before they were part of Hitachi, and now then Koki, and now of course Eppendorf. So as I mentioned before, we were very cautious for the culture, also the Japanese culture, because the pride about the company, about the product, about their technology capabilities was very strong. But Eppendorf was a good brand in also in Japan. So we could build upon and create a good basis of trust once we took over. And we kept the brand, so we had a 2 to 3 year PMI process, and we kept the brand for a while. Now we are starting to co-develop jointly new products, which then are fully Eppendorf, but they come. So there's a Koki or Hitachi or Heimek core, and then the Eppendorf outside. So it's an evolution, but it took us a while to really make sure we keep the Heimek employees really engaged. But there was a good basis of trust. So to the same point Darius mentioned, it's really about coherence, about trust. We needed to slow down a little bit to adapt to the Japanese culture here and check it out. But overall, it worked very well, and I think it was a very good acquisition.
I was going to ask you about the Japanese culture, if that presented any particular challenges.
No, we have been well embedded already as a sales organization within Japan, with all the specifics you have in Japan. Yeah, so maybe Conor also knows this, I think, and so we were familiar with some of the things, do's and don'ts there. But overall, I think our brand attributes, the Eppendorf brand attributes, very well resonated with also the cultural way the Japanese people would work and perceive things, also on the emotional side. There's far more emotion in Japan, but of course it's held back. So you need to know about it, you need to sense it, and then to build it also into maybe any branding discussion here. But there was no real branding, so they just said it's the name Heimek. So they were proud of their name. So for them, the brand was the name. Yeah, and but all the very sophisticated branding exercises, especially Marcom related, that was new to them. So we could bring some new value also into this organization.
Interesting. How does the Eppendorf brand help to foster innovation and enter new markets? I mean, for example, the Eppendorf Innovation Company, and how is that supporting your overall expansion plans?
Yeah, that's a very good question, because as we are privately owned, we are not so much exposed to the need to bring in investors' money. But the innovation company was a great concept, because we could see that maybe some years ago that we needed to reach out maybe to the startup scene to get technology partners. So what we have now is a small entity within the company, and we had a big debate in the beginning about would we create a separate sub-brand to Eppendorf. Like, they wanted their own logo, because of course they wanted to be a bit more, Eppendorf is the big old-fashioned, and then you have the new startup-y culture entity. But at the end, it paid well that we kept consistency. So it's part of Eppendorf, but it has a little bit of slight own identity to reach out to and attract the younger talent, and also to be more present in the startup scene. And so we could make some good connections, partners, development partners. We also have some investments in some of these companies. I think that's, we have other companies in our field, also German companies who do this now, who have their own little, how we say, VC arm, and we do it on a smaller scale. But for us, it's really a technology question, right? But we learn a lot also about brand attributes and the resonance of the brand of Eppendorf brand within the younger generation, for instance, right?
And is it
also in the digital space?
Is it different with the younger generation?
Yeah, it's a different play, right? So we are around, as I said, I'm 30 years now with the industry. So I'm, maybe I can't know what a lot of things are new. We can see this now when we do performance marketing. What marketing channels work now better than before. So you need to always adapt the mix here, right?
Yeah. A question for all of you, being the marketers in your organizations. Many see brand as a cost center rather than a growth driver. And I hear that conversation a lot. Can you share examples of how your brand has directly contributed to revenue growth, whether through investor confidence, customer loyalty, competitive differentiation, or any other sort of thing that you kind of measure? And I'm sure you have a lot of metrics in place. Conor, I'll come back to you with that question first.
Yeah, we're very intentional about this as well. And again, I was in the extraordinary position, lucky position, to be able to set it up right from the beginning, right? So I said, we're going to build a brand, we're going to measure it, and we're going to measure its impact. And of course, the value of the GE Life Sciences brand was on the books and part of the conversation around the transaction. So we had to be able to reference real data, real insight that said this is what the brand value is. So, and we've communicated very, very explicitly, very clearly to not just the leadership of the organization, but to the finance team, to our tax teams, and so on, as well as our associates and our commercial teams, that brand premium is a tangible thing that you can measure by doing voice of the customer. You go out there and you ask them questions and you get the insight and the data, and that brand premium drives operating margin expansion because it allows you to ask for more price, right? But premium is not enough if nobody knows who you are, so you need brand power as well. We explain what brand power is in terms of the ability to reach and really have that share of voice in the market. So power gets you recognized, maintains you top of mind for that 95% of the time when your customer is not in buying mode. When they switch into buying mode, I mean, if we're talking to brand experts, I don't need to carry on. You know what we're talking about. We explain it very carefully, and then we use examples from other industries. And the classic one that we used that kind of resonate and hit home very, very clearly was the difference between Samsung and Apple in the consumer electronics industry. I mean, many by an order of magnitude more Samsung devices out there, but who's more profitable? And it's Apple. And by showing that, and by measuring it, and by demonstrating that we could also measure our brand using our own internal methodology, we're able to convince stakeholders that this is really, really worth doing.
I have a follow-up question to that, and then I want to hear from Andreas and Darius. When you think about, you mentioned share of voice, and I'm curious what your voice is. Is it paid, owned, earned, everything, or do you really focus in on one?
No, it's all of those. I mean, the debate's out there, right? You got Ritson and Byron Sharp having this lovely conversation between themselves, which is always fun to watch. And I'm a firm believer in bothism, right? Which is Ritson's term. We go after the whole lot, right? So very, very broad market communication. Communicating to the whole market, but then targeting in our performance marketing. So you absolutely have to do both.
Right. Okay. Darius, how do you think about that?
Yeah, so I think as a smaller company, for me, there's been like two real qualitative moments where we've known the value of brand. I think the first is, again, back to talent. It's when we talk to candidates, they often prefer us to others. And one of the reasons they would cite is, I love your website. I love the brand you've created around this. I want to work for a company like that. So we hear it often. And in a rapid scaling company, this is the number one thing we're looking for. We need to attract the top researchers. We need to attract the top ML people. And also, we're luring them away from Google, who can pay a lot more than us in many instances. So we really need to have an emotional connection with potential candidates. So this is the one thing we hear often, to say that our brand is an attractive one they want to work for. So that's great. On the other side, one of the things that has set us apart from our competitors is our access to data. So we work with top research facilities all across the world. We work directly with the PIs and with other people who deal directly with patient data. And to build trust with healthcare practitioners and with researchers is incredibly difficult. And over the years, we've managed to do that. And our brand now stands for, a big sense of trust, and that we treat the data with respect. We've developed technologies to make sure that privacy is always guaranteed. And we do right by academic centers, and we use the data in the right way, and we're very transparent. So I think just from those two things, we've seen that brand is a real, unlocker of loyalty and of value for us. So in our organization, I think even our CFO, they really recognize the power of brand and what it can do. So again, it's taken 4 years for me to build this, but I think we're in a good place now where everyone realizes the value of brand.
Great. Andreas, how does it work at Eppendorf? You've got the company's a lot older and more sort of time in the space to get the brand name out there. What's the view of the leadership team of the value of brand?
I think there's a clear commitment that this is important and this is a clear value. But of course, once it gets really into the hard numbers, then and this is a traditional engineering-minded company. Of course, what is the aspect? How much of the top line is really directly related to whatever we call branding, right? And Conor, you mentioned Kantar. Of course, this is a good systematics to dollarize the impact of branding with salience and meaningfulness and differentiation. So we had done an exercise. So it took me a while to really build a sort of a model based on certain assumptions fitting to our company. I came up with something like maybe 1/4 of the top line is more or less directly related to this sort of branding topics, the soft power of the company. And of course, you can argue, and then of course you immediately enter into a debate with the CFO and all these finance guys, about but your assumption is here and there and so on. But I think you can really allocate this. So we should, especially in our roles, we should be bold enough also to really say, no, this is the contribution of the brand. So you can build business cases, you can make a clear assumption on investments in marketing and brand. And marketing is more short-term, brand is really the long-term part. And at the end, what really sells it is, you have an impact on the pricing level you can demand, so the price premium, for instance, and then also on the demand. So you get so salience is an important factor, which is really a clear outcome of good branding. So people know you, unaided or aided, they know you, they trust you, and so you have a preference out there. But what about the other 75%? Of course, there's a big debate with all the divisions and the engineering team and the R&D team. But this is the product quality and it's the user experience. But all this together, this is the brand promise, right?
I think, Andreas, it's so interesting. You mentioned that it's helping a leadership team and people around the organization understand that brand is everything that you promise to all your stakeholders. And if you can get that understanding in people's minds, and especially as you talk about customer experience, I suspect, Darius, you're in a beautiful position because you're differentiated by virtue of who you are and what you do. But large parts of our organization are not particularly differentiated in their technology from the competition. How do we differentiate? We differentiate through brand and through customer experience and through the customer promise we make. And if you can get people to understand it's everything that people say about you behind your back, then you get the executive suite to buy into it, right?
Conor, you mentioned Mark Ritson. I like how Mark Ritson talks about differentiation and distinctiveness. So I think distinctiveness is one of those things that you can own and be different, because differentiation is quite difficult. And as you pointed out, it's difficult perhaps for some of the businesses that you've got in your sort of stable. I'm curious about the relationship that you all have with your CFO. Andreas, you mentioned your CFO. It's really interesting because I have seen many conversations about CMOs trying to get the CFOs on side. how do you work with your CFO? Conor, how do you work with your CFO?
Well, we're joined at the hip. I'm very fortunate in that my CFO's partner runs a business and has built a brand themselves. So they both really understand the importance of brand, despite the fact that, you know, as a CFO, they've been in big blue chips for all of their career. Really gets it, I had to learn to speak the language of finance as well. The brand's an asset. Treat it like an asset, talk about it like an asset, show that you understand that you're talking about capital allocation when you talk about spending, when you talk about spending on rebranding buildings and so on, and you're talking about operating expense, you're talking about brand communication, brand advertising, and if you're talking really about operating margin expansion being driven by good brand communication, you're talking their language, you've got common ground. It's very simple. But I so many times so very lucky in this respect.
Andreas, I know you have a degree in finance. Does that help?
It helps. It helps a lot, but particularly my little finance education was not really on branding. So, you learn a little bit the language, and then so of course I'm no longer just the marketing or branding guy. So it helps, yeah.
Right.
Talking to the point is also when we talk about branding and marketing, and interesting what you said here, also Conor and Darius. Normally they treat brand related stuff. This is one of these intangible assets on the balance sheet, and anyway we don't have this, right? So we don't need this. So this is a bit the attitude, and then at the end, and you really can show the brand value, which is then a tangible asset even in the P&L. That makes a difference.
Yeah.
So I think once we are able to really embed brand-related outcomes into the P&L, then I think we win the game, also with the finance, and then there's no doubt anymore. Right?
Darius, your CFO, is he one of the talkative ones or one of the quiet ones?
A bit more on the quiet side, so the analytical side. But I think, as a real growth-oriented business, anything that unlocks further growth is where we want to be investing in. And I think I've done a good job of explaining how brand is one of the ultimate, unlockers of value and of growth. So I think everyone has realized that that's one of the key vehicles to invest in if we want to keep on growing. Because for us, it's also a difficult ecosystem because you have technology partners, you have your talent, you have your data providers, you have your customers, you have your investors, and to keep all of them happy and on the same growth path takes a lot of mark-ons. So with that simple storytelling, it's I think a value that they've seen is a massive thing to invest in because that smooths everyone's journey towards growth. So I think for me, my CFO has definitely realized that marketing can help unlock growth. So more than happy to invest in it.
Excellent.
Just one other thing I'd add, MaryLee. Sorry, I as the head of marketing and brand, I work on the strategy side as well, the upstream strategy, but I also own the fourth P, which is pricing. So the C-suite sees me on a regular basis with spreadsheets full of numbers talking about pricing and price attainment and so on. So because of that, I'm able to come with some financial credibility to the C-suite table. It's challenging. I'm not naturally a happy, financially literate person by nature, but I knew that was my biggest weakness and had to lean in, and it seems to have worked.
Yeah, well, Mark Ritson would advocate for that too, owning the pricing piece. Investors are paying more attention to brand strength. We're seeing that when they're evaluating companies. In your experience, what aspects of the brand matter most to the investors, and how do you communicate that brand value to them? And I'll start with Darius because I know you've had a lot of experience in this space.
Yeah, so investors really care about novelty and about being cutting edge and about being the lead in your field. So that's certainly one thing that I think brand and good markets can help you achieve. So this feeling of cutting edge, they're on the cusp of new discoveries being made. That's definitely one thing. The second thing is they do want to know that you are building a trusted ecosystem around you. So they really look at ecosystem strength also, because they often say the difference between a company that works and that doesn't work is how well they cultivate the ecosystem around them. And they know that brands attract other brands, and that ecosystem is a very good thing to invest in. And I think thirdly, also they invest in people. So there is a little bit of work to be done around making sure that your founder and founders in our case, to make sure that they are in the news, they're saying the right things, they have the right speaking points when they're at engagements. And of course, just at the end of the day, that their pitch is so sharp, so simple, and so clear. So I think those are three ways in which I really help Owkin drive value with investors.
And are you seeing that? Are you seeing investors looking at brand more carefully?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's because a lot of them now have mixed portfolios where they do some consumer, some technology, some B2B. And I think a common thread along all of those is that people just want to, build a future with brands they enjoy and with brands that mean something to them. So I think in this kind of world creation of the future, which VCs really think they're building a new world for tomorrow. I think that really tickles them because they're like, well, they know they have to take people on an emotional journey to get to tomorrow. And they know that brand is a very powerful way of telling that story.
That's great. Conor, your experience in this space with investors?
I have to speak at it from a slightly different angle, given the ownership structure of Cytiva as part of the Danaher Group. The most interesting data that are important for investors and that I get asked most about is competitive set comparison amongst the other organizations that our customers might be considering, and as long as we can provide that data credibly, the investors tend to be happy. It's meaningful that they're actually asking about that,
right?
But we also have to show up with real innovation. So when there's investor meetings, when there's investors at trade shows, it's not just good enough to show up pretty. You've got to show up meaningfully, and you've got to show up with technology and innovation that really speaks to customers. So it's a combination. It can't just be brand on its own. It's got to be brand, and it's got to be backed up with real credibility that from your customers' view.
Right, that makes total sense. Andreas, you're in a slightly different fix with being privately owned, but I'm sure you have views on this.
Yeah, well, the point is maybe a slightly different perspective on this. And it's always this fight, do you want to be a hero brand or a love brand? And you need to be both, so to the extent that you need to transport also innovation and, some modern stuff and new features. And that's typical what we always do, given our like our pipettes or centrifuges, which are basically, we are tool makers for scientists, right? So and of course the scientists, we don't sell products, we sell peace of mind or reproducibility or reliability or things like that. So that's the love brand aspect. But of course you need to spice it with enough innovation, and also this is then also maybe reflected in some of the marketing material we create, which is then a bit more fancy or a bit more crazy, let's put it this way, right? So you need to find the right balance here. And given a privately owned company where there is a high emphasis on a family spirit-like culture, you need to balance this correctly, right?
Yeah. A final question for you all. If you had to give one piece of advice to marketing leaders undergoing a pivotal business moment like the ones that we've been talking about today, what would it be? Darius, I'm going to start with you.
I think find champions within your organization. It can't all rest on your shoulders. So it's you have to influence people, and again, using their language. So the CFO is influenced with a certain kind of story. The CEO is influenced with a certain type of story. The chief people officer is influenced by a different story. So make sure you gather those proponents and take them on the journey with you.
Conor?
I'd honestly say a couple of things. One, it's not rocket science. It's relatively simple to do this and to do it well. And then you're doing it with a science community, you're at an advantage if you can talk to them in their language. And then the other piece, which I will always say to CMOs, no matter how good you want to be, you can always be better. So relentless performance management. And that's so very important.
Always learning. That's a good point. Andreas?
Yeah, well, given our situation, and maybe also as Germans are not known to be not very risk averse, let's put it this way, I would say the future belongs to the brave. So that's one of the slogans. I think you should always be more courageous, try out maybe more disruptive stuff, but of course, make sure you have all the support and the excitement of the organization behind you. That's the most important thing, and the excitement is really important. Create new types of excitement. That's it, I think.
Plus, it makes it fun for you and everybody else around you.
Mm-hmm.
Great advice. Well, I think we're going to break to a video for a second, but I would just like to take the moment to thank you all so much for your time today. Really appreciate your insights. It's been a great conversation. I've enjoyed it. I hope you have. And I hope our audience has as well. But sincere thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you
Real
very much.
pleasure. Take care.